As a creative aspect, TV is one of the best things that we do as a species. Along with music and film and books, they bring out the best creative of all of us. They entertain and they bring so much joy to many. They invoke emotion and enable us to feel things that we bury sometimes deep down. That's what this podcast is for. Welcome to A Million Little TV Shows. This is what I call the breakdown while I break down. Each week I will go through a different TV show, a different season of that TV show, and different episodes of that show. And I will break down not only emotions, but I will break down stories from my life, and let you know why these TV shows mean so much to me, and why I believe that they are some of the most important shows out there. This podcast is here to highlight a lot of smaller TV shows, or TV shows that don't really get a platform, because we know of a bunch of TV shows that get a multitude of different podcasts. Ted Lasso, Game of Thrones, The Office, they've all got several podcasts out there analysing all types of different things. But there's not many out there for the little guy, and that's what I'm trying to highlight. So each week I will go through a different show, different seasons, different episodes, and I will go across all different kinds of genres and different countries to bring you what I believe is some of the best TV out there. So I'm glad you're here with me. I'm glad you're here for this journey. And if you've watched the shows before and you wanted to come here and get an analysis on them and have someone go through them and pick out bits that you might have enjoyed, then I'm glad you are here. If, however, you have never watched the show and you just want to come and have someone talk in your ear about different TV shows, I'm glad you are here. But I hope that it inspires some people to go and seek out these TV shows. They deserve to be watched. They were made with love and care, and they are the same as this podcast, made with love and care. I am your host, Mike, and I will take you through every adventure, every horror, every piece of drama, and I hope that you enjoy the show. Hello there, and welcome back to this A Million Little TV Shows podcast. This is now episode 5 of season 10, and today we're going to be getting back into the psychological world of Mindhunter, and I cannot wait to finish this season off. I think it's been excellent so far, and I've been really enjoying rewatching this show. So I'm grateful for you all to be here, and it's incredible that I get to do this and be able to enjoy it as much as I do. I know sometimes it comes off as that I don't, and this is just a job, but it's not. This is a real passion for me, and I really do enjoy it. So I thank you for listening. I thank you for being here, and I think we should just kind of have a little recap on what's been going on. So the show is about the inception of profiling within the FBI and how that whole process came about, and just how they ended up using it to full effect so that they could catch killers and be able to bring people to justice when it came to catching these predators, these awful people. But not only that, it ended up changing the game, because it would have helped so many other places in the world when it came to processing people like this. So prior to this, they would have been getting away with things, whereas now, with the techniques that this team brought in, we ended up having the investigation skills to be able to go out there and find serial killers or people who were harming others for their own pleasure, but also understanding the reasons why and being able to figure out who someone was because of the things that they did, instead of just hoping that they'll be caught and then finding out why they did what they did. So it's such a fascinating show, especially when I've done things like Clarice and Hannibal already. I feel that they're in the same kind of genre. Obviously this is more real life than those two, but yeah, I love this show so much and I just cannot wait to get into it. So I think we should do that. This is Mindhunter Season 1, Episodes 8-10. Episode 8. So Holden has now been invited to speak at schools as well as his outreach program to local law enforcement. He's going into a school to actually speak to the children about what he does and how it's going to help future law enforcement. However, he has been handed a list of words that he can't actually use or say because they're a little bit too extreme. I can understand why. It's words like mutilation and deviancy. And the reason the principal doesn't want them to be used is because the kids will ask more, and then Holden may say more than he should. And they try and work out a system so they can integrate what Holden's going to say and not be too offensive, or at least too rough on the kids, because these are words that once they're explained, the kids are probably going to end up having nightmares, and that would bring a lot of heat towards the school. So they just want to temper the language a little bit. However, after the class, one of the teachers actually speaks to Holden and starts to tell him about the principal. It would seem that the principal has certain proclivities, and having them around children isn't exactly ideal. Now, what he's actually doing is he is taking the children to his room, his office, and tickling their feet and then giving them money. Now, obviously, in this day and age, if that was going on, that teacher would be arrested straight away. There would be a massive investigation, and yeah, it would be a real shit show. But back then, he's trying to play it off as it's a little bit of harmless fun. Some parents have got involved, and the teachers are obviously seeing this and seeing that these kids are coming back to class with money, and some of them might be exploiting him in the way that they know they can get money, but also in a way he is exploiting them by giving them money. Some would say maybe even hush money. And it's at this point that Holden asks the question, or at least the teachers are asking the question of, how far will it go? He goes home and he discusses this with Debbie, and Debbie is on his side about it. She says that it's a weird thing for a principal to be doing and that maybe it does need further investigation. But of course, Holden's FBI. He shouldn't be involved in any of this, and it's not really his place to do anything. But of course, at the end of the day, it's a potential crime. And so he's a little bit in two minds about this. However, throughout the episode, he also feels like Debbie may be cheating on him. Because at first she gets dropped off by one of her partners at college, and this guy Patrick seems to be someone she's interested in. And so Holden starts to get a little bit suspicious. And so when she actually asks him if he will come along to an event later on in the episode, where essentially they are in the dark and they have to assess who they are talking to while in the dark. It's kind of an experiment in sociology, and they're just trying to test out a theory. But the light ends up shining on in the room, and Holden sees Debbie with Patrick and realizes that they are heavily flirting, and so ends up walking out. Before all this, however, we see a new character come in, a guy named Greg Smith. He becomes part of the BSU, the Behavioural Science Unit, and instantly Holden wants to test him. He wants to make sure that he is good enough to actually do the job, and he makes him listen to some tapes. Of course, while he's listening to these tapes, it's of horrific things. Girls screaming and God knows what else is going on those tapes. And Holden basically asks him, do you still want this job? Greg agrees, and Holden makes him come to this school with him to actually revisit some of the teachers, some of the pupils, and some of the pupils' parents, as well as the principal. The principal doesn't want to back down on any of this and is basically telling them that they've got it all wrong, it's just a playful thing and they shouldn't be too concerned about it. But Holden, obviously, with the job that he does, feels like this is something more. Greg throughout it is no help whatsoever. It seems like he's more of a hindrance to any of this. And eventually, after all the interviews are done, Holden can't tell whether this principal is actually doing a bad thing or just doing a weird thing. He knows that things could escalate, but then he also knows that things might not escalate, and that he doesn't know whether he should be stepping in or not, and whether it's FBI related. But just before he heads back to the officers, Greg actually asks, do you think we should maybe bring down the boot of the FBI on this guy? Holden agrees, and he goes back and he speaks to the principal, basically telling him, look, stay away from the kids, stop doing the things that you're doing, and just rein it in a little bit, because this is weird. On the way back, they realise that they've done the wrong thing, and the next night he is brought up to his boss's office to talk through the incident. He obviously gets a bollocking for what he's done, but while he's there, so is Greg, and Greg has basically confessed everything that's gone on, and Holden always felt like this Greg guy was going to be a snitch, basically, a little spy for their boss, and now he's already proven it. So this is a hard situation for Holden, and when he goes back downstairs and ends up speaking to Bill and Wendy about this situation, they tell him, look, you needed to ask our permission on this one, because what you ended up doing was stupid. You've now put this whole BSU thing at risk because you wanted to go off and play saviour. We can't have you doing that, Holden. It's not fair on us, and it's not fair on the unit. he tries to turn it on Bill and basically say, look, I know you, Bill, and if this was your kid, 100% you'd have gone after him. If your kid was getting tickled inappropriately by someone who was then giving them money, you would go after them. I don't care what you say. But Bill sticks to his guns and says, you need to keep my kid's name out of your mouth on this one and stop what you're doing. Going on these cowboy expeditions to actually try and prove something. As I said earlier, Holden and Debbie end up breaking up, and after that, Holden ends up getting a phone call. The phone call is from a superintendent in charge of the school that principal was working at, and he tells him, look, we're thinking about firing him, we know of the inappropriate behaviour, but we could really do with your call on this. Do you think this guy is a danger or not? And even though he's been told not to do this anymore, Holden ends up telling him, look, I think there are issues there and that it could potentially get worse. And so the superintendent realises that he needs to do something and thanks Holden for taking his call. Episode 9. And so, after a few episodes of not seeing the ADT man, we managed to see him again this time. It seems like he is waiting in a home, waiting for his next victim. However, he seems to get impatient, he gets up, and he walks out. So whoever his victim was going to be that night, he's spared them, it would seem. We then get Bill and Holden heading towards Joliet Prison in Chicago. Now, the only reason I know Joliet Prison is because of the Blues Brothers movie. So I always find it hilarious when it comes up, but then you realise that there's some fucking bad people in there. And this time they're heading over to meet a man named Richard Speck. Speck is someone who, in the course of one night, managed to kill 8 women and sexually assault one of them as well. Now, of course, Bill and Holden want to find out why he did such horrendous things. But Bill knows from the interviews that this guy's done that there is potential that he's not going to be very forthcoming with anything. And especially when they start actually doing the interview, he comes in like a ball of fire. He is enraged, he has been pissed off, because essentially the guards at the prison haven't actually listened to what Bill and Holden wanted. And they ended up tossing this guy's cell and then dragging him in to meet the FBI. So he is full of piss and vinegar when he walks in. They tried to calm him down by essentially telling him, look, that's not what we agreed. We agreed to be brought in the back door and it would all be hush-hush and we would just sit down and have an interview with you. Eventually he sits down and they manage to get to talking. However, he's being cocky, he doesn't want to answer the questions, and eventually Holden shocks both Bill and probably himself, as well as Richard Speck. He uses language which is something I'm not going to repeat on here, and let's face it, I fucking swear a lot. But he uses something that in the context of the conversation that they're having, especially with the prisoner who is as foul-mouthed as Richard Speck is, it kind of makes Richard feel like this guy is trying to be on my level. Bill knows, however, that they're probably going to get fucked for this, because what Holden actually says on tape isn't the kind of thing that they should be saying. They should be acting more professional in these meetings. However, eventually they get to talking and Richard actually admits, yes, he killed 8 women, but the only reason he killed the 8 women is because they saw him attack this other woman. He corralled them into different rooms and he went into each room and killed them, but he only ended up having sex with one of them. He claims that he could have done all of them and he could have gone all night and he's such a stud and all this kind of stuff, the usual bullshit. But they got what they wanted. They got an answer for what he did and why he did the things that he did. On their way back to the officers, Bill essentially says to Holden, you might need to redact the quote that you said that got Speck talking, because it's not a good look. And there are certain people who are going to be a little bit pissed off by this, and by that he means Wendy. Holden thinks about it and says he's essentially not bothered. Look, whatever comes his way, he'll take on the chin. But after a while of thinking about it, he knows the right decision to make. It's also after a visit from the principal's wife from the previous episode. This woman has tracked him down and tells him exactly what's happened since the principal was let go. Essentially, she tells him that he's done a bad thing and that he doesn't really know her husband whatsoever. And now people are abusing this man and he isn't convicted of anything. He's just mistaken, he's misunderstood. Holden keeps claiming that he had nothing to do with the actual outcome of her husband's investigation, but she feels that she knows different. And so when Holden heads back into work, knowing the power of his words now, he decides that maybe they should redact that comment. Greg is the one who is typing things up, and he tells Greg, look, just cut it out of the actual speech and we'll say that we got rid of the tape or we re-recorded over the tape, whatever it is, just to show that the work that they are doing is actually making a difference. They get a call down to Adairsville, Georgia, which they end up solving a case where a 12-year-old girl has been raped and murdered and her body tossed in the woods. However, while they're there, they're scoping out what actually happened, especially in and around the house, and they're trying to profile this killer to see how he actually ends up killing this poor girl. As they're going around, they actually find that there had been some tree trimming done outside of her house on that very day, and that this wasn't a very regular occurrence. When they actually find out the company that did this, they hear that one of the guys who's an employee there had actually been investigated for attacking a 13-year-old girl. And so, because of the actual crime, and they know that this man is potentially ashamed of what he did, they end up bringing him in and he confesses to the murder. This is something that Holden holds over everyone's head because he's proud of the fact that he's managed to do this and that this system is working for them. Because what happens next is the Office of Professional Relations comes and speaks to the team. They take them into a room and they actually grill them about what happened because Richard Speck has put in a request that they are investigated. It turns out that not only has he been beat up for meeting with them, but also he feels like Holden has quote-unquote fucked with his head. And so the team is being investigated now. Of course, it's a convicted criminal who is serving around about 1,200 years in prison, so they're not that bothered about this whole case. They're just looking like they're pushing the paperwork around. And so when the transcript is handed over and they tell them that they lost the tape, the OPR guys basically say, look, we're done with this. We're not going to really truly investigate it unless something really bad comes up. However, Greg just cannot keep it straight. He's feeling guilty throughout. He tells Holden on the way back to their office that he has sweated through his shirt and that he is not cut out for this. Eventually, they get back to the office and Wendy has found the original tape. She's listened to it and she's let their boss listen to it. And while they have, they're both pissed off because Holden's been lying this whole time about what happened on that day and how he got the information that he got. And of course, Bill is an accomplice because he was sat in the interview. But now, of course, Greg is doing things at the will of Holden. And so Wendy and their boss Shepard are basically going to start holding their feet to the fire. They need to start disclosing things properly and they need to start making sure that they adhere to the actual questionnaire that Wendy laid out in a previous episode. Because this can't keep going on. They can't keep going in like cowboys on this. Greg, knowing that he probably isn't going to fit in here, and the guilt that he's feeling about lying to the internal investigations people, he ends up sending them the original tape, the one that they'd said that they had recorded over in the interview. And so now, going into the last episode, Holden is probably going to get fucked for this, because what he said on that tape was inappropriate. And now everyone is going to know how inappropriate these guys are being in these meetings, and they're going to get fully investigated. And finally for this season, episode 10. So they get a call from Georgia. Both Holden and Bill get this call from Georgia, and it turns out that they didn't actually listen to the advice that Bill gave in the last episode. Essentially, Bill told them not to do a polygraph test because if he beats it, then he'll end up being cocky. He'll think that he's God, and that won't help their case whatsoever, so don't do that. And confront him on the evidence. So when Bill and Holden find out that they haven't done that, they've ignored them, they have to go down to Georgia to try and help sort this out. They sit this guy down and he comes in voluntarily. He wants to just talk to them about what's been going on. But Holden wants to make a real performance of the whole thing. He goes out and he gets a bunch of evidence. Everything from the case and everything including the rock that actually killed this poor girl. They set it up in this interview room and they sit down to chat with this guy. As they do, Holden is trying all different types of techniques to try and get this guy to confess, or to give some sort of reaction as to why he did the things that he did. It's stated in the episode that at the time, the legal age in Georgia was 14. This girl was 12. And when Holden says, well, in that little uniform that she wore, she was a majorette, that she could have been, 14 at least. This guy starts to agree, and it seems like every time Holden goads this guy, he bites. So essentially this guy admits to fancying younger women. And eventually, when the murder weapon is revealed, this rock, that is his full downfall. He ends up breaking down and he can't look at it anymore. That night, Holden and Bill go out on the town, but Holden just cannot keep his mouth shut. Very much like this guy with the polygraph test, Holden now feels like a god. Anything anyone says to him, he's not bothered about. He just wants to prove that he is the best at what he does, including when it comes to Bill. But this story ends up in the press because obviously Holden talks way too much. And he tells these local cops that, he's been speaking to Ed Kemper and he's been speaking to other serial killers, and they've got, Berkowitz and Manson on their list. So they're going to be speaking to really famous killers or cult leaders in the next few months. Bill thinks it's a bad idea to let this information out, but too late. And it is, because it ends up all over the press and they become minor celebrities down in Georgia. Wendy's pissed off by the fact that Holden's done this, and she tries to put out some fires. She doesn't want this going against their unit, because essentially Holden did this off his own back. And especially since the whole technique isn't really ready for field testing yet, she's getting a little bit antsy about this. Holden goes with her back down to Georgia and they try and sort it out, but they're told that this guy is going to go on death row because he killed this poor girl. And so Wendy just cannot forgive Holden for what he's done. This isn't the way that she wanted it to go for this unit. But the district attorney will seek the death penalty. The next day, Holden goes into the office and he's got a note on his desk that essentially tells him that someone needs to talk to him, a doctor out in California. He calls him but can't get any answer, and eventually he gets through to someone that tells him that the doctor is in surgery, but the reason that he's being called is because Ed Kemper has tried to commit suicide and has noted that Holden is the only person that he would like to see or to talk to. Just then, Shepard comes down and takes both Wendy and Bill outside. Holden doesn't know what's going on and eventually joins them and is told that the OPR have actually received a tape and it's the original interview that they gave with Richard Speck. They end up going back into a meeting with OPR, but individually this time, and they give their own story. But Holden takes full responsibility. He tells them, look, Bill was there, but I had nothing really to do with it. I did what I did, and Greg had really nothing to do with it. So don't come after them. Come after me if you're going to come after anyone. But look, we're doing what we're doing. We're making progress, and we've just solved a murder out in Georgia. So let's not judge this too harshly. Eventually, Holden just walks out of the meeting and is told that it will be put on his permanent record if he does, but he just does it anyway. He heads to his car, he heads to the airport, and he heads out to Los Angeles. When he gets out there, he gets up to Sacramento. I say Los Angeles, I mean California. But he gets to Sacramento, and when he gets there, he actually finds Ed Kemper alone in a room with a massive gash on his arm. Kemper is being monitored through glass, and no one else is allowed in that room with him. Only Holden has gone in there alone, and while he's in there, Kemper starts to ask about this new technique that he's got. Kemper seems quite flattered by the fact that he was Holden's first, essentially. He shows Holden his arm, but let's not forget how big this guy is. He's a real unit. And even though he is chained up, he isn't actually chained down. So his legs and his ankles are chained, but his hands are free. He gets up off the bed and stands in front of Holden, as if Holden is going to break for the door. He tells Holden, look, if I wanted to kill you, you'd be dead. He starts to inquire why Holden is actually there, because Kemper's been trying to get a hold of him for weeks, but now, when he's in this jeopardy where he's tried to kill himself just to get Holden's attention. Why is he here? Even though Kemper did this, he didn't expect Holden to come. Holden tells him he doesn't know, and Kemper tries to hug him. But as he does, Holden realizes whose arms he's in at that particular moment and bats him away and manages to run off. But Holden looks like a child compared to Kemper. Everything has kind of got on top of Holden, and he's been so like up his own arse in the last few episodes. Like, even when Debbie dumps him, it's fucking, he's a smug prick by the end of this episode. He runs out into the hallway and collapses due to having a panic attack. Obviously, he's in a hospital, so there's nurses everywhere and they help him, but at this point we're not sure of his fate. Just then we see the ADT man, and he is just burning stuff in his back garden. Every time the fire hits these pictures that he's burning that look like they've been either from his imagination or from real life, they show horrific scenes. Girls tied to posts while naked, females being scared, and the last one is a familiar setting. A girl is on a bed, and it's very familiar to us because we've seen this picture before. This was shown in the very first episode, and it proves that this man is the man who killed the woman and her child and then did unspeakable things to their bodies. And so we now see this ADT man is actually a killer and has probably escalated even further from way back in episode 1. But we'll have to find out who that guy is next season. Now, what I loved about the show was the fact that Holden got his comeuppance a little bit. He was good in the start, and it seemed he was very shy and very kind of introvert, whereas by the end he's just smug and like the world is revolving around him when it comes to this whole technique that he and Bill have trying to develop. And, you know, Wendy's been in on this as well, but he is just unbearable by the end. And when he actually speaks to Debbie in a supermarket, you know, he's walking around and trying to tell her about his day, and she is trying to talk back to him about what's been going on and give her perspective on things. And he basically tells her, look, I don't give a shit about what you think, just listen to me. And that's kind of how we ended up. And so going out to visit Ed Kemper without Bill there and without any real security, he put himself in danger just because he thinks that he is better than everyone else. He has this Superman God complex, and it's just been a detriment to him in the end. And then obviously we've had the ADT guy throughout the series where he's just been teased and we're not sure who he is, what he's doing. And until that last episode, I totally forgot the link with the first episode until I saw the picture. And yeah, it was a shock. Even on my second viewing, it was still a shock. As for the relationship with Debbie, I feel like it was just rushed. I'm not sure if the actress actually ended up signing a contract for the second season. I don't think she's in it, but it just feels like we needed to get rid of her. We knew that we were going to be going for a second season, but she wasn't going to be there, so we just needed to get her out of the picture. But overall, I have really enjoyed watching the process and seeing how they actually interacted with these guys and these vicious, horrible people, and how manipulative they can be and how they ended up in the situations that they ended up in. But it is a fascinating watch, and I think the actors who played, you know, these serial killers have done so well. And I know what's coming up in the second season, or at least know one character that's coming up in the second season, and from what I remember, he is very interesting as well. But I'm done for today. I've loved this show so far. I can't wait to cover the second season. I think I'm doing that next season. I'm pretty sure I'm doing that next season, but I'll confirm that in a couple of episodes' time. But yeah, this has been really fun. So I'm done for today. I hope you're all doing well out there, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye. As always, thank you for listening to this podcast, and you could really help me and the podcast by giving a like, share, subscribe on all major platforms that you listen to podcasts on. As an independent podcaster, this will just help me exponentially when it comes to actually doing more things with this podcast. I truly do enjoy this, and I absolutely love revisiting these TV shows with you guys. So any engagement from you is always welcome, and I will try and listen to all of you when you give suggestions or just tell me what you think about the podcast. But once again, thank you for listening, and until next time, I will speak to you soon. Bye.